What happens when a Hollywood powerhouse walks onto daytime television? Not to promote a movie, not to charm the crowd, but to challenge the very voice that dominates the table. Before we step into this storm, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, like this video, and drop a comment right now. Because what you're about to witness isn't just another celebrity appearance. It's a moment that left an entire studio frozen in silence. The lights inside the studio of The View burned hotter than usual that morning. The air felt charged, like the split second before lightning strikes. The hosts were already seated behind the curved glass table, papers stacked neatly, coffee cups steaming, smiles polished for national television. At the center sat Whoopi Goldberg, calm, composed, a veteran of controversy. Her presence alone commanded attention. Decades in the spotlight had taught her how to hold a room with nothing more than a raised eyebrow. But today, something felt different. The producer's voice echoed from backstage. "We're back in 5-4. The audience applauded on cue as the camera glided across the set. And joining us today, one of the co-hosts announced brightly, Academy Award winner, producer, activist. Matt Damon. The doors opened. Matt stepped out, not with the easy grin people expected, not with the relaxed wave of a man promoting his latest project, but with a controlled seriousness. He waved politely, but his eyes scanned the table, locking briefly with Whoopi's. It lasted less than a second, but everyone felt it. He took his seat. Applause faded. The first few minutes were predictable. Smiles. A clip from his upcoming film rolled on the screen. Light laughter followed. A joke about Boston accents. Matt played along, charming but restrained. Then Whoopi leaned forward. "So," she began, voice measured, hands folded. "You've been very vocal lately. Some would say outspoken. A subtle shift. The audience sensed it." Matt nodded slowly. "I try to speak up when I think something matters. And some people," Whoopi replied, tilting her head, "think celebrities should maybe stick to acting." The crowd murmured softly. A few chuckles. But the tension was rising. Matt's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I've heard that before. You don't think," Whoopi continued, "that sometimes stepping into political territory can create more division?" Her tone was calm, but the words were pointed. Matt leaned forward slightly. "I think silence creates more damage." The air thinned. One of the co-hosts shifted in her seat. Another glanced at her notes, suddenly very interested in the paper. Whoopi held his gaze. "So you believe it's your responsibility to challenge people?" "I believe," Matt replied carefully, "it's everyone's responsibility to challenge narratives that feel incomplete." A ripple of reaction moved through the audience. Applause from one side. Uneasy silence from another. Whoopi's expression hardened, just slightly. Incomplete according to who? There it was. The first spark. Matt inhaled. He could feel the heat of the lights. The millions watching at home. The split-second decisions that could define headlines by nightfall. "According to people who don't feel heard," he said. The room stilled. Whoopi leaned back, crossing her arms lightly. "And you feel they're not being heard here?" A direct hit. The co-host beside her looked stunned. The audience collectively leaned in. Matt didn't hesitate this time. Sometimes, yeah. A sharp intake of breath swept across the crowd. Whoopi's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's interesting." "It's not an attack," Matt added quickly, though his tone carried conviction. "It's a conversation." "But you're suggesting," Whoopi replied, voice now edged with steel, "that this table doesn't allow certain perspectives." "I'm suggesting," Matt said, locking eyes with her, "that sometimes when someone disagrees, the reaction feels more like dismissal than dialogue." The word dismissal hung in the air like smoke. One co-host jumped in, trying to lighten the tone. Okay, we're getting spicy this morning." A nervous laugh rippled through the audience. But neither Matt nor Whoopi smiled. Whoopi leaned forward again. "You've been on this show before. We've had conversations. So why now?" Matt's expression softened for a fleeting moment, then sharpened again. "Because lately, it feels like anyone who questions certain positions gets labeled. And labels shut down conversation." "And what label have you been given?" Whoopi asked quietly. "Out of touch. Privileged. Irresponsible." The audience murmured again. Whoopi nodded slowly. "Well, you are privileged." A few scattered claps broke out. Matt didn't flinch. "Yes, I am. That doesn't mean I can't ask questions." There it was, the line that would later explode across social media. The camera zoomed slightly, capturing the tension between them. Two seasoned public figures. Neither backing down. Whoopi's voice dropped lower. But asking questions is different from challenging people who have lived experiences you haven't. Matt's fingers interlocked on the table. And assuming I can't understand because of my background, that's not fair either. The silence this time was deafening. Even the co-hosts stopped shifting. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay quiet. Whoopi studied him, eyes unblinking. So what exactly are you challenging today? Matt exhaled slowly. This was the moment. The crossroads. I'm challenging the idea, he said deliberately, that disagreement equals disrespect. A few audience members applauded loudly. Whoopi didn't. She leaned back again, nodding once. Disagreement doesn't equal disrespect, she said calmly. But tone does. Context does. History does. Matt's voice softened, but the intensity remained. And shutting people down because you assume their intent, that does damage too. The room felt smaller now. Claustrophobic. One co-host finally interjected. Maybe what we're seeing here is two people who care deeply about the same issues, but approach them differently? It was a lifeline, but neither of them grabbed it. Whoopi turned slightly toward the audience. I've been doing this a long time. I've seen what happens when certain rhetoric spreads unchecked. Matt nodded. And I've seen what happens when fear stops conversation. The words overlapped, collided. For a split second, both stopped speaking at the same time. And in that silence, heavy, electric, the entire studio realized this wasn't promotion. This wasn't scripted banter. This was a real clash of ideology, perspective, and pride. Whoopi's eyes softened just a fraction. You think we don't allow space here? Matt hesitated, just long enough to show vulnerability. I think sometimes passion turns into walls. A murmur of agreement floated from somewhere in the crowd. Whoopi considered that. Really considered it. Then she said quietly, or maybe what you're feeling is accountability. The word accountability landed like a gavel strike. Matt's shoulders stiffened. Accountability should go both ways. Gasps. One co-host whispered under her breath. Oh boy. The director behind the cameras gestured frantically, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let history unfold. Whoopi held his gaze, unwavering. So you're holding us accountable? I'm holding everyone accountable, Matt replied. And that includes you, she asked. A beat. Yes. The audience erupted, some clapping, some booing, some stunned into silence. The clash had fully ignited now. And as the applause and murmurs tangled together in chaotic noise, one thing became painfully clear. This conversation was only just beginning. The applause didn't settle all at once. It fractured, like glass splintering across the studio floor. A few cheers. A few sharp boos. Most of the audience sat frozen, unsure whether they were watching a debate or the beginning of something that would spiral far beyond the studio walls. The red on-air light above the camera glowed like a warning. Whoopi didn't blink. Matt didn't look away. The tension had stopped being polite. It had become personal. One of the co-hosts shifted in her chair, forcing a brittle smile. Okay, this is clearly a passionate conversation. But no one was listening to her anymore. Whoopi folded her hands on the table again, her posture composed, but her eyes sharper now. You say accountability goes both ways, she said slowly. So let's talk about yours. The audience quieted immediately. Matt tilted his head slightly. I'm listening. You've made statements recently, Whoopi continued, that some people felt minimized lived experiences. You walked some of those back. You apologized. So when you talk about open dialogue, do you also acknowledge the harm that words can cause? There it was. The shift. This wasn't abstract anymore. It was about him. Matt inhaled through his nose. He had expected this. But expecting something and feeling it hit live on national television were two different things. I've said things imperfectly, he admitted. I've corrected myself when I learned more. After backlash, Whoopi said calmly. A ripple of reaction passed through the audience again. After listening, Matt countered. The co-host to Whoopi's left leaned forward. But Matt, that's part of what people mean. Sometimes it feels like celebrities say something bold, get applause from one side, and only reconsider when there's public pressure. Matt's eyes flicked toward her. Public pressure isn't always wrong. It can be a signal. Or, Whoopi added, it can be a consequence. The word consequence hung there like a blade. Matt straightened in his seat. So what are we saying? That public figures shouldn't speak unless they're 100% certain they'll never misstep. We're saying, Whoopi replied evenly, that when you hold a microphone as big as yours, you don't get the luxury of casual commentary. The audience clapped, louder this time. Matt's lips pressed together. He nodded once, acknowledging the applause, but his eyes never left Whoopi's. And when you hold a platform like this, he said carefully, gesturing subtly toward the table of the view, you shape narratives too. The co-host on the far right exhaled audibly. Whoopi didn't react immediately. That silence, measured, deliberate, felt heavier than any interruption. You're implying, she said at last, that we misrepresent. I'm implying, Matt replied, that sometimes strong disagreement gets framed as moral failure. A collective "oh" rippled through the crowd. Whoopi leaned forward again. And you don't think moral failure exists in rhetoric? I think labeling someone as morally bankrupt because they ask questions is dangerous. Depends on the question, Whoopi said, her voice steady but unmistakably firm. The temperature in the studio seemed to rise another 10 degrees. One audience member shouted, "Let him speak." Another shot back, "She is speaking." The producers shifted nervously in the wings. Matt turned briefly toward the crowd. "I'm not here to attack anyone," he said. "I'm here because I think we've lost the ability to disagree without assuming the worst about each other." Whoopi's gaze softened, just slightly, but her tone didn't. "And I'm here because I've seen what happens when certain disagreements erode protections for real people." The weight of her years in the industry, her history, her lived perspective, it all pressed into that sentence. For a moment, the clash felt generational. Matt's expression changed. Less combative, more introspective. "Then maybe the problem isn't disagreement," he said quietly. "Maybe it's fear." "Fear of what?" Whoopi asked. "Fear that conversation will unravel certainty." The room went still again. Whoopi tilted her head. "Or fear that conversation will normalize harm." There it was again, two fundamentally different lenses on the same word. Matt ran a hand briefly over his jaw, a subtle sign of tension. "If we can't even explore nuance without being shut down." "Who shut you down?" Whoopi interrupted. The interruption was quick. Precise. Matt paused. That pause said more than any sentence. "Public discourse," he replied at last. "That's broad," Whoopi said. "It feels broad when it comes at you from every direction." A murmur of sympathy drifted through parts of the audience. One co-host tried again to mediate. "Is it possible," she offered gently, "that both things are true? That words can cause harm, and that shutting down dialogue can also cause harm." It was the most balanced sentence spoken all morning. For a split second, it seemed like the tension might ease. Then Whoopi looked at Matt and asked quietly, "When you say you feel dismissed, do you think that compares to communities who feel erased?" The audience audibly reacted. Matt didn't answer immediately. The weight of comparison hung heavy. "No," he said finally. "It's not the same. But that doesn't make it irrelevant." Whoopi nodded once. "Fair." That single word shifted something. It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't escalation either. Matt noticed it. "I'm not claiming equal struggle," he continued. "I'm saying that if the goal is progress, we need more conversation, not less." "And conversation," Whoopi replied, "requires listening." "I am listening. So are we." The two locked eyes again, but this time the energy felt different. Less explosive. More searching. The audience sensed it too. The volume lowered. The tension became quieter, but no less intense. Whoopi rested her chin lightly on her hand. "Let me ask you something personal," she said. Matt nodded cautiously. "When someone tells you your words hurt them, what's your first instinct?" He didn't hesitate this time. "To understand why." "And before that," she pressed. He paused. The honesty in his face was unmistakable. "To defend myself." A ripple of recognition moved through the audience. Whoopi leaned back slowly. "That's human." It was the first time her tone carried something softer than challenge. "And when someone challenges this table," she added, "our first instinct might be to defend too." The co-hosts exchanged glances. Matt's shoulders relaxed, just a fraction. "So maybe," he said carefully, "we're both reacting from the same place." "Maybe," Whoopi admitted. The tension didn't vanish, but it shifted shape. From confrontation to confrontation with awareness. But live television doesn't pause for reflection. One of the co-hosts glanced toward the producer, who was gesturing frantically toward the commercial countdown. 30 seconds. Whoopi looked into the camera briefly, then back at Matt. "You came here ready to challenge," she said. "I came here ready to talk," he corrected gently. "And you got both." A faint smile flickered across his face. "So did you." The audience let out a nervous laugh. 10 seconds. Whoopi straightened. "This conversation isn't simple." No, Matt agreed. It's not. 5 seconds. The producer's hand sliced the air. And we'll be right back, Whoopi announced smoothly to camera, professionalism snapping back into place. The theme music swelled. Applause erupted, louder than before. But as the cameras cut to commercial, the real storm wasn't over. Because off camera, without the safety of broadcast delay, without the structure of moderated turns, the conversation was about to become even more raw. The applause dissolved the moment the cameras cut. The theme music faded into silence. The red light blinked off. And suddenly, the safety net of broadcast polish was gone. Stagehands moved quickly. Makeup artists hovered at the edges. Producers whispered urgently into headsets. The studio audience, told to remain seated during the break, buzzed with anxious energy. But at the center of it all, the curved table remained still. So did they. Whoopi Goldberg leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just measured. Across from her, Matt Damon rolled his shoulders once, as if releasing tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then Whoopi broke the silence. You came in ready, she said quietly, no performance in her voice now. Matt gave a faint, honest smile. I figured I should be. You thought we were going to come at you? I thought we might disagree. Whoopi nodded once. Disagreement doesn't scare me. I know, Matt replied. That's why I'm here. The off-camera stillness felt heavier than anything that had aired live. Without applause, without reaction cues, their words sounded more exposed. One of the co-hosts leaned forward, lowering her voice. Look, nobody here thinks you're the villain. Matt looked at her. Sometimes it feels like that. Whoopi tilted her head. Because people push back? Because the pushback sometimes feels absolute. There it was again. That wordless tension between pushback and punishment. Whoopi tapped her fingers lightly on the table. Let me tell you something, she said, her tone calm but personal now. When you sit at this table on The View, you learn very quickly that no matter what you say, someone will decide you're wrong. Matt nodded slowly. That's true everywhere now. Exactly, she replied. So why frame this place like it's uniquely dismissive? Matt hesitated. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because he was choosing it carefully. I don't think it's unique, he said. I think it's influential. That landed. Influential meant powerful. Powerful meant responsible. Whoopi's eyes sharpened slightly, not defensive but alert. Influence cuts both ways. I agree. A producer stepped closer. 2 minutes, she whispered. The countdown had started again. The off-camera air felt fragile, like thin ice over deep water. Whoopi leaned forward slightly. Here's what you might not see, she said, voice low. For every comment you think shuts someone down, there are 10 we choose not to air because they cross lines. Matt absorbed that. And for every statement I've made that gets amplified, he replied, there are hours of conversation that get reduced to one sentence. They both understood editing, framing, the machinery of media. Whoopi's expression shifted, less combative now. You think you're misunderstood. I think we all are. That answer lingered. 30 seconds. One co-host exhaled. Maybe the real issue isn't disagreement. Maybe it's the speed. Matt looked at her. The speed at which judgment happens now. There's no space between statement and verdict. Whoopi nodded slowly. That's not wrong. Matt glanced toward the audience, who were pretending not to listen but clearly absorbing every word. When I said accountability goes both ways, I meant that we're all navigating that speed. A stage manager raised a hand. 10 seconds. Whoopi straightened, the professional mask sliding back into place. All right, she murmured. The red light blinked on. And just like that, they were back. We're back, Whoopi said smoothly, eyes to camera. And during the break, we were continuing this conversation. A few audience members laughed nervously. Matt smiled faintly. It didn't magically resolve. No, Whoopi agreed. It didn't. But something had shifted. The energy wasn't explosive now. It was deliberate. Whoopi turned slightly toward him. Let's do something different, she said. Instead of debating abstract ideas, let's talk specifics. The audience leaned in again. Matt nodded. Okay, you've said Whoopi began. That labeling shuts down dialogue. Can you give an example? Matt inhaled. When someone expresses uncertainty about a complex issue and is immediately branded with the worst possible intent. And sometimes, Whoopi countered, that uncertainty has historically been used to stall progress. True, Matt acknowledged. But assuming bad faith from the start doesn't build trust. A few audience members clapped softly. Whoopi didn't interrupt this time. She listened. And trust, Matt continued, is what makes accountability meaningful instead of punitive. There was that word again. Punitive. Whoopi's gaze stayed steady. You're worried about punishment. I'm worried about fear, he clarified. Fear of speaking at all. And I'm worried, Whoopi replied, about the consequences of speaking carelessly. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. The audience sat silent, absorbing the balance. One co-host jumped in gently. What if the answer isn't less accountability or less dialogue, but more patience? Matt considered it. Patience requires space. And space, Whoopi added, requires humility. Their eyes met again. This time, there was no spark of combat, only recognition. Humility. It was a word neither had used before. Matt nodded slowly. Fair. Whoopi's lips curved just slightly. Not a smile, but something close. That's twice today. The audience laughed softly. The tension, though still present, felt transformed. It wasn't a battlefield now. It was a tightrope. Whoopi leaned back. Let me ask you something else, she said. If someone at this table challenges you again in the future, will you see it as dismissal? Matt shook his head. Not if it feels like this. Like what? Like we're both actually listening. The room quieted. For the first time since the segment began, applause rose without division. It wasn't thunderous. It wasn't explosive. It was steady. Whoopi nodded once, acknowledging it. Listening doesn't mean agreeing. I know. And accountability doesn't mean silencing. I know that too. There it was, the closest thing to common ground they had reached. The producer gestured again, wrapping soon. Whoopi turned toward the camera. These conversations aren't comfortable. No, Matt agreed. But maybe they're not supposed to be. The audience responded stronger now. Applause rolled through the studio, less fractured than before. But beneath that applause was something else. Not resolution. Not victory. But awareness. Because everyone in that room knew something had happened. Not a shouting match. Not a meltdown. Something subtler. Two powerful voices had collided, and neither had retreated. As the segment closed and the credits teased the next topic, the cameras slowly panned across the table one last time. Whoopi's expression was composed, but thoughtful. Matt's posture was relaxed, but reflective. And across the country, viewers were already reaching for their phones. Clipping quotes. Posting reactions. Choosing sides. Because while the studio lights might dim at the end of a segment, the real explosion? That was about to happen outside the building. The studio lights dimmed. The audience filed out in clusters, some whispering intensely, others shaking their heads, a few still arguing softly as they stepped into the bright New York afternoon. But inside the control room, no one moved casually. Phones were already lighting up. Producers hovered over monitors, replaying the sharpest exchanges in slow motion. The word accountability. The phrase goes both ways. The pause before Matt admitted his instinct was to defend himself. The quiet moment when Whoopi said, "That's human." Every second was being clipped. Every expression frozen into screenshots. And outside the studio walls, the storm began. Within minutes, hashtags started climbing. Matt's name surged. So did Whoopi's. So did the name of The View. On one side of the internet, posts declared Matt brave. Honest. Willing to challenge power structures, even when sitting directly across from them. On the other, posts defended Whoopi Goldberg as seasoned, composed, and right to hold him accountable in real time. Clips went viral. One particularly sharp 10-second edit showed Matt saying, "Accountability should go both ways," immediately followed by Whoopi's calm but piercing, "So you're holding us accountable?" The comments beneath it were a battlefield. He destroyed them. She schooled him. Finally someone said it. She didn't back down. He was respectful. She was powerful. It wasn't a meltdown. It was something more dangerous. It was layered. And layered conversations don't explode in one direction. They fracture into many. Back inside the studio, Matt stood near the exit, jacket draped over his arm. A publicist leaned close, whispering updates. "It's trending. Everywhere." Matt nodded slowly. Not triumphant. Not shaken. Just aware. Across the hall, Whoopi sat alone in her dressing room for a moment longer than usual. No cameras. No applause. Just silence. She replayed parts of the exchange in her mind. Not the sharpest lines, but the pauses. The hesitations. The moment he admitted defensiveness. The moment she admitted it too. A knock at her door. "You good?" a producer asked gently. She gave a small nod. Yeah, because she was. But she also knew this wasn't over. By evening, major entertainment outlets were running headlines. Matt Damon challenges daytime host intense exchange. Whoopi Goldberg pushes back live on air. Explosive debate divides audience. Cable news panels dissected tone. Body language experts weighed in. Former talk show hosts gave their takes. Comedians joked about it in monologues. The clip of their off-camera smiles, caught briefly when they thought no one was watching, circulated too. See, some viewers wrote. It was respectful. Others weren't convinced. Polite doesn't mean harmless. The next morning, the studio audience line wrapped longer than usual. People wanted in. They wanted to witness whatever might happen next. Because that's the thing about live confrontation without screaming. It lingers. It leaves space for interpretation. 2 days later, Matt addressed it during another interview. Not defensively. Not aggressively. It was a conversation, he said simply. I respect her. I respect the table. We disagreed. That's okay. Meanwhile, Whoopi opened the next episode of The View with measured calm. Last week, she said, looking directly into the camera, we had a strong exchange. That's what this table is for. No apology. No escalation. Just acknowledgement. The audience applauded. Because something rare had happened. Not a shouting match engineered for ratings. Not a celebrity storming off. Not a host cutting to commercial mid-sentence. Instead, viewers had witnessed tension held, not avoided. And that unsettled people more than chaos would have. In quiet corners of the internet, deeper conversations emerged. Clips of the moment when Matt admitted his first instinct was to defend himself became teaching points about ego and vulnerability. Clips of Whoopi calmly reframing accountability became examples of composure under pressure. Some viewers changed their minds mid-thread. Others dug in harder. But almost no one ignored it. Weeks later, the ripple effects still surfaced. University media classes used the exchange to discuss public discourse. Podcasters debated whether the moment signaled a shift toward more nuanced conversations in mainstream television, or whether it was simply a flashpoint. Behind the scenes, mutual acquaintances reported something unexpected. There was no feud, no Cold War, no secret bitterness. In fact, when asked privately about the moment, Whoopi reportedly said, "He showed up ready. I respect that. And Matt, he told a friend, she doesn't flinch. That's rare. Respect forged in friction. Because here's what most viewers missed in the heat of the moment. Neither of them won. Neither of them lost. They both stayed. They both listened, eventually. They both revealed something human beneath the public armor. And in an era addicted to collapse and cancellation, that felt almost radical. The real aftermath wasn't the trending hashtags. It wasn't the headlines. It wasn't even the divided comment sections. It was the quiet shift in tone that followed. On the show, in interviews, in the way certain conversations unfolded with just a little more patience. Not perfect. Not transformed overnight. But nudged. And sometimes nudges matter more than explosions. Because explosions fade fast. Nuance lingers. Now we want to hear from you. Was Matt right to challenge the tone of the conversation? Was Whoopi right to hold firm on accountability? Did this moment represent growth, or just another flash of celebrity tension? Drop your opinion in the comments below. Don't just pick a side, tell us why. And if you want more cinematic deep dives into the moments that shake Hollywood from the inside out, make sure you subscribe to Stage View right now. Because on this channel, we don't just replay the headlines. We step inside them.